Well, hey there, I'm so glad you could stop by today to join us for our chapter spotlight. And this week, our chapter spotlight is going to be Judges chapter 5. So, I really want to lead into this chapter spotlight thinking about women in our culture today. Women really want to be heard, they want to be seen as powerful and strong. And I bet you that many women today may never think to look to the Bible to see some examples of some strong, capable women that God used to carry out His plan. So today we're going to see some examples of two women that God used in Judges chapter 5. Judges chapter 5 is really Deborah's song of praise for what just happened in chapter 4. So we're really going to go back and forth into chapter 5 and chapter 4 to really get a good idea of what's going on in this chapter. But Judges 5, like I said, is Deborah's song of praise for this victory that had just happened in chapter 4. And it was victory obtained over Jabin, who was the king of Canaan. So I want to read Judges chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Then sang Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, on that day, saying, Praise ye the Lord for the avenging of Israel when the people willingly offered themselves. So in verses 1 through 5, Deborah is first mentioned. She's mentioned before Barak's name is mentioned because she wrote the song of praise that we're going to be looking at, and she was the chief person in the direction of the war. If we look back to chapter 4, we see that Barak was afraid because he was outnumbered by this other army. And Deborah was not afraid. She was turning to God, not numbers. I really found it interesting that if you look at what the name Deborah means, it's very simple. It's B-E-E. So can we say maybe she was the original Queen Bee? I found that really cute. So in verse number 3, we see Deborah calling on everyone to join her in giving praise to the Lord, the God of Israel. And verse 3 says, Hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. Even I will sing unto the Lord. I will sing praise to the Lord God of Israel. So she's calling on the kings and the princes to join her in this praise to God. And in verses 6 through 8, we see the miserable condition that Israel was in before this victory. According to John Gill's commentary, the roads were infested by thieves and robbers, and these thieves and robbers came from Canaan. This is, the kingdom that Israel was fighting against during that time. And the roads were so infested by thieves and robbers that the people couldn't travel. They had to quit their jobs. These thieves also robbed their homes. So the Israelites were in a really sad state. I mean, they had left their homes because of this. They had gone into some fortified cities that were nearby, and that just means that they were cities where they could be protected. So I guess you could say it was kind of like a ghost town here. And then we see in verse 7, Deborah says, This was the sad state until I, Deborah, arose, that I arose a mother in Israel. God rose her up to teach and instruct them in the will of God. And at the end of verse 13, we read, The Lord made me have dominion over the mighty. Again, God raised up Deborah to be the judge over Israel, and she triumphed over the Canaanites. So I have to go back again to chapter 4 for a minute for those who may not be familiar with what just happened leading up to this praise that we're seeing in chapter 5. Deborah, the judge, remember, the Queen Bee, summoned Barak, the leader of the army, and said, Hey, God commanded you to gather your men and go to Mount Tabor. And God said, I'll call out Sisera. Again, I'm not sure that's the pronunciation, but that's what I'm going with. Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet with his army, and I will deliver them into your hand. And Barak is saying to Deborah now, I'll go if you go with me, but if you don't go, I'm not going. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Here we have the leader of an army saying to a woman, I'm not going unless you go with me. So Deborah says, well, okay, I'll go, but you won't get the glory. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. So now we have Deborah and Barak leading the way, and the Lord did give them the victory. The whole army fell by the sword. Not a man was left except for this general Sisera who fled on foot. So we're going to see here in just a minute what happened to Sisera. But let's go back to chapter 5 real quick. And in verses 14 through 24, Deborah goes on to praise those who came out to fight and contributed to the victory. And for those who didn't come out to fight, she scolded them, and some she even cursed. And in verses 24 through 27, we find out what happened to Sisera. Remember the general who ran away. In verse 24, we find Deborah saying, blessed above women shall Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, be. Blessed shall she be among the women in the tent. So now she's saying, okay, here's another woman that she's saying should be blessed, and she's referring to her as a woman in the tent. Now, what does that mean? I think we're probably talking about a stay-at-home mom here. I did a little research. I'm not just making that up. It's a woman who stayed home and took care of the things at home. So Sisera was on the run, and he came to her tent. And in verse 25, he asked for water, and she gave him milk or fresh butter. The verse says, in a lordly dish. So I read again in John Gill's commentary that this was some sort of cream, something that would make him maybe be inclined to sleep a little bit. And she brought it in this dish that was fit for any lord or nobleman. So that's what the lordly dish means. And John Gill says she probably did that so he wouldn't be suspicious of her. So here she comes with this stuff for him to eat or drink in this really nice dish. And then once he was asleep, and for those of you who are squeamish, you might need to plug your ears up for a minute, she took a tent peg and drove it right through his head and into the ground. So once again, God used a woman to accomplish this victory. And in verse 31, the psalm concludes with a prayer for destruction for the enemies of God and happiness for those who love God. So ladies, don't ever think that God does not want to use women to accomplish his work. Even back in the time before Christ walked on this earth, God was using women. A working woman, a judge, that's who Deborah was, led an army to victory along with Barak, and a housewife finished the job. So stay close to the Lord, ladies. Pay attention to where he is working and let him use you to accomplish his will. He'll do it. And until next time, have a good day.